In Aldous Huxley's Future, everyone's happy. Quote, you can't make tragedies without social instability. The world's stable now. People are happy. They get what they want, and they never want what they can't get. They're well off. They're safe. They're never ill. They're not afraid of death. They're blissfully ignorant of passion and old age. They're plagued with no mothers or fathers. They've got no wives or children or lovers to feel strongly about. End quote. In Aldous Huxley's Future, even if you're not happy, you can get happy really quickly with a government-sponsored drug called Soma. Quote, and if ever, by some unlucky chance, anything unpleasant should somehow happen, why, there's always Soma to give you a holiday from the facts. And there's always Soma to calm your anger, to reconcile you to your enemies, to make you patient and long-suffering. In Aldous Huxley's Future, you're not just born happy, you're conditioned. You're engineered. Quote, till at last the child's mind is these suggestions, and the sum of the suggestions is the child's mind, and not the child's mind only, the adult's mind too, all his life long. The mind that judges and desires and decides, made up of these suggestions. But all these suggestions are our suggestions, suggestions from the state, end quote. And sometimes, in reading Aldous Huxley's Future, our own contemporary society jumps off the page. So today we're examining his magnum opus, the hugely important dystopian classic, Brave New World. The eccentric and utterly horrifying world that serves as a backdrop to the story is perhaps the most famous and most stirring character in the book. A cabal of 10 oligarchs run the world state, which is a totalitarian government that eliminates free will through continuous entertainment, genetic engineering, and indoctrination. Their gods are Henry Ford and Sigmund Freud. Their calendar year is referred to as AF, or After Ford, beginning the year that Ford's first Model T car rolled off the assembly line in 1908. There's so much in the pages of Brave New World that is eerily and directly applicable to American culture right now, a shared belief that the problems of our world are not your concern, a cultural fixation, an addiction to entertainment and distraction, and unbridled mass consumerism. What is perhaps most alarming about Brave New World is something that goes beyond the eugenics, the psychological manipulation, the caste system, and the totalitarian government. It's that the population doesn't desire anything else. There's little hope for change because there's little desire for change. Brave New World has been banned and challenged in the United States and globally since its publication all the way back in 1932. But most recently, the Elizabeth School District in Colorado removed 19 books from its school library, including George Orwell's 1984 and, of course, Brave New World. They were eventually reinstated and put back on shelves. In Neil Postman's 1985 cult classic book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, he writes of both 1984 and authors George Orwell and Huxley, saying, quote, an Orwellian world is much easier to recognize and to oppose than a Huxleyan. Everything in our background has prepared us to know and resist a prison when the great gates begin to close around us. But who is prepared to take arms against a sea of amusements? Very interesting question. Who is prepared to take arms against a sea of amusements? Doesn't that feel like a strangely relevant question right now in 2026? The answer to that question should worry all of us. After a quick break, I'll be joined by two award-winning authors. Claire Beams, author of The Garden, who was once described by Joyce Carol Oates as a feminist voice for the 21st century, and a prior member and existing member of the Velshi Band Book Club, M.T. Anderson, the author of Feed. Today's meeting of the Velshi Band Book Club is officially in session. Joining me to examine Brave New World, Aldous Huxley's magnum opus, a dystopian classic and a novel that I urge everyone to read or reread, is Claire Beams, author of The Garden and a returning member of the Velshi Band Book Club, M.T. Anderson, author of the book Feed. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us and back with us. Claire, good morning to you and welcome to the Velshi Band Book Club. I want to go back to Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death, in which he writes, what Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there'd be no reason to ban a book, for there'd be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. I'm beginning to think in 2026, in this moment, while we talk probably more about 1984 than we do about Brave New World, maybe Huxley was on to where we are right now.
That feels very true to me. I mean, I think that one of the things I most respond to in Brave New World is this sense of almost the internalized nature of the dystopia, that you don't really need the system to continue to enforce itself because people have absorbed the system and want to enforce it on themselves in the name of or in the pursuit of a certain kind of ease.
MT, this is the point that I worry about. There's the truth, and then there's everything, right? There's the fire hose of information that we've got. On any given day, we'll cover a bunch of stories, and then I'll have on social media a bunch of people say, why didn't you cover this one? Or this should be the lead. We're confused because there's so much information out there. And that's just the news, not everything that the news is competing with.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that one of the interesting things, though, I mean, in the book, the idea is that there is this drug you take, Soma, that softens everything by putting you into a kind of a state of exhilaration or whatever. As they say in the book, it's like Christianity or alcohol, but with none of the drawbacks. And I think the thing is that we do exist in a kind of a media world, a social media world that is sort of like that. We, in general, we're sort of very soothed by things. One of the weird moments, though, that I think is happening right now is that perhaps, weirdly enough, consumer capitalism is showing its fault lines. So that we're kind of waking up from the Soma, I feel like, as the middle class goes, wait a second, we actually can't afford all of these luxuries that are supposed to, soothe us and make the world easier for us.
Claire, A Brave New World opens with a tour of the Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Center, which is where we learn that in the new world, children are no longer conceived, they're engineered, they're basically manufactured and broken into a caste system. Eugenics is a central theme of the novel. Your work centers on motherhood and women's autonomy. Tell me about the overlaps here.
Yeah, I think, I'm generally just fascinated by systems effects, fascinated and horrified by systems effects on bodies. And I think I love that opening scene of Brave New World so much because of all these really visceral, weird images we get of the process of growing people to fit and suit their respective positions in the strata of society. So, you get epsilons being deprived of oxygen, alphas being given every advantage, so that everyone wants no more than they will get. And I think my novel, The Garden, is very much about certain ideas about pregnancy and motherhood and how to do those perfectly and how those ideas affect women when women take them inside themselves.
MT, both Brave New World and your book Feed examine consumer culture. There's an overlap between that and the idea that you want for nothing because you only want what you can have. But talk to me about that, because I think you're right. We're at something of an intersection, particularly as we see government using certain technologies that we've kind of given them permission to use because we like the convenience of an internet that knows everything about us.
Right. I mean, I think, to pick up where what Claire said, in the book, also the society is very stratified, right? There's a caste system. You have literal kind of alphas, betas, all the way down to epsilons, that kind of thing. And the incredible thing is that actually a lot of our sort of tech bro CEOs at this point are sort of endorsing publicly an idea of techno-feudalism, where that caste system becomes very real. So, people like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Peter Thiel has very openly said that there is a situation where if you are a great man with a vision, the problem is that people are going to not want what you want. They're going to argue. They're going to try to legislate against you. And technology, he says, is the way around that. Technology is the way of circumventing the will of the people. And this kind of thing, I mean, it's incredible that these people with really kind of very adolescent, edgelord, apocalyptic worldviews actually now have giant government contracts. So the kind of stratification that Huxley warned against, it's happening. I mean, we're a very unequal society. This is real.
It's kind of remarkable that this book in 1932 was so prescient about where we are. Claire, let's talk about Soma a little bit, the drug that's provided by the state. Bernard refuses to take Soma in the book, saying, quote, "I'd rather be myself," he said, "myself and nasty, not someone else, however jolly," end quote. It's an empowering little statement, but we kind of all have to face up to this right now, right? What is us if we are our own selves.
Exactly. And what is happiness just the absence of sadness, right? I think very much in the novel, the idea is very much that people will be content if you just make them not miserable, right? And not too attached to anything, lest they risk losing that thing or not fully attaining that thing. And I think, the characters that we follow, like Bernard, like Helmholtz, are generally people who are a little different from what their stratum would suggest they should be, and therefore a little bit more open to this idea that there might be more than what Soma is offering. But it's a dangerous idea because it feels good to not be miserable.
MT, without giving anything away, Bernard ends up ultimately unwilling to sacrifice his autonomy sacrifice his comfort for autonomy. What's the lesson here?
I mean, I think the thing is that it is really hard to resist these things. It always seems for example, you brought up 1984 earlier, and there, you can see the protagonist fighting against this system. And it's really very clear that you would want to be resisting if you were him, even though he ends up,
yes,
literally being tortured. But, just as you said earlier, it's harder when there's seduction. And that is kind of what we are confronting. And I think the way forward is the fact that, in a sense, the system is showing its cracks now. The middle class is very aware that we are not where we were 6 or 7 years ago, even, let alone 10 years ago. I think that the key to resistance is in that moment of us saying, like, wait, as a society, we want things that this oligarchy does not want.